During my time on this earth, I have read quite a lot of text by quite a few philosophers. I'm not a philosophy student of some kind, I'm barely an enthusiast, but you know, sometimes you just run across one of the texts and then you just gobble it up. And of course, having philosophy and ethics classes from 5th to 13th grade does help. And especially in the age of the internet, coming across wisdom or life perspectives or interesting thoughts is very easy if you're browsing Reddit or scrolling through the comment section on Pornhub. And yes, I do consider the ramblings of people with usernames that contain more numbers than letters to potentially be philosophy. And the reason for that is really quite simple. Why shouldn't it be? Because here's the thing, despite my reading all of these different philosophers, if you asked me about any given philosopher that exists, what he thinks or she thinks about one particular thing, maybe for the famous ones, I could give you the broad brushstrokes of what they believe. But I'll never be able to quote any philosophers, or to attribute quotes to philosophers at a pub quiz. And really, why would I be able to do that? Why would anyone ever memorize that kind of information? Who the fuck cares which philosopher came up with which idea? Unless you're some kind of historian who's trying to establish like a genealogy of philosophy, who influenced whom, that is not useful information that you need to waste space in your brain on. And I'm not at all saying that knowing which philosopher knew which thing and who influenced whom isn't an interesting thing to know or something that could yield some interesting insights. And a lot of philosophers are very complex philosophies that you need to know all of in order to understand them in their entirety. But you learning their name over the course of learning their philosophy should be incidental at best. I do not care who came up with the idea. I just care about the idea. Let's say, for instance, you and your friends are having a discussion on the perception of reality, because, you know, microdosing. And a friend of yours says, well, you can't really know information about a thing unless it is self-evident or you have experienced it. And then you respond, no, hold up. I can just tell you information with language, I can convey that to you, and if you know something about the thing that we are talking about, you can just infer that knowledge that I told you by way of language. Now, Immanuel Kant said the very same thing, albeit with better words and more convoluted language, and also in German. And don't listen to your philosophy teacher, it's Immanuel Kant, not Kant. And even if you do know where that idea came from, is it really necessary to mention that it came from Immanuel Kant? If the idea is good, should it not be able to stand on its own without the weight of the name Kant behind it? Because if you're having a discussion and someone brings up a point and then you make a counterpoint and say that this was said by Kant, and because Kant was a big-brained nibber, it must therefore be true, that's an argument from authority, isn't it? And I mean, of course, just noting that Kant was the person who said this does not in and of itself constitute an argument from authority. That only becomes the case if you say that it is true because Kant said it and not because it's just a good idea or a good argument. But it begs the question, why do so many people feel the urge to note that Kant was the person who said this? Why is it that if you don't know where the idea originated from, even if you know the full idea and all of the ideas that are ancillary to it, and the complex construct of ideas that it is a part of, you are considered uneducated about philosophy? An engineer doesn't need to know who invented the petrol engine to understand how it works and how to put it in a car. A pastry chef does not need to know who invented the banana cream pie in order to, if supplied with the recipe, make a very good banana cream pie. A mathematician doesn't need to know who came up with the maurer-cartan equation in order to be able to understand it and apply it to all kinds of contexts. I mean, of course, in this case, who invented it is in the name, much like with the diesel engine invented by Rudolf Diesel and the walnut pie invented by Walter W. Walnut because he wanted a pie to put his favorite nut in, the pecan. But that's just because we need names to call things. If human civilization was destroyed like right now and all of our knowledge was lost, in 10,000, 20,000 years, when the octopus civilization rises to take our place, they will eventually reinvent the diesel engine. It will be the same thing, but it will be an entirely new idea to them, and they won't call it the diesel engine. Could you imagine, like in the far future, when the octopus civilization, they discover, oh, there was a civilization before this, and then they go to Japan, and they find hentai? What kind of weird ancient aliens mythology is going to originate from that? Why then, for the love of water, is it so important for philosophers or intellectuals to know who it was that said what thing? Objectively, if you know the thing that was said and can slot it into the right context, it doesn't matter. I mean, of course, we all know why. You have 1/3 of people who just wants to feel smart and exclusive and special and better than everyone else. Then you have another 1/3 of people who says, well, let's just use that. I don't want to put up with their bullshit. If I go about telling them that it really doesn't matter, they probably understand it on some level. And then you have 1/3 of people who just sort of goes along with it because they don't know that there's another option. I don't consider myself to be an intellectual or really particularly educated about anything at all, for that matter. I mean, I do have a lot of knowledge, most of which is probably mostly useful for trivia purposes. I do like to learn new things all the time, but I rarely go mega deep into any given subject. I prefer to have just functional knowledge of it, and then if I care, I can expand upon that. Because there's always more information to learn, and there's always new things to understand about things that you already know. My brain space is just too valuable to memorize useless shite, though, to be fair, most of my brain space is already taken up by useless shite. Like, did you know, for example, this is a good one, that Yucatan, the peninsula in Mexico, the word Yucatan actually means I do not know what you are saying. The Spanish just rolled up there and they asked the natives, hey, what's this place called? And the natives went, I have no idea what you're saying, man. I do not speak your language. Please, I don't know what you're saying. And then that became the name. Also, another one that I personally find amazingly interesting is Eskimo doesn't actually mean anything offensive. I personally was told that it means person who eats raw meat like an animal, but really it's just person who speaks a different language. The settlers adopted it from another Native American group that they met before they met the Eskimo groups. Because, you know, those people over there is the name of most people groups in the world. But at the end of the day, I do not know who came up with the idea of life is meaningless, so make your own meaning. And I don't care. It's just a good idea. Thank you very much for watching this video. Do all the things that you would do with this video. Consider supporting me on Patreon and all that things. Also go on Twitter. Also, very important news. Please do not support me on Make Support anymore. The website just 404s at this point. I've never received a single cent through them. I mean, it's been a couple months since they lost their payment processor. Some people have claimed that they're still being charged, but that couldn't be Maker Support because their payment processor said we will no longer be processing payments for Maker Support. And so if you haven't re-entered that into a new payment processor, which I'm pretty sure that they couldn't find one, and that's why the site is shutting down, I don't see how that would work. But yeah, if you've been supporting me on Maker Support, just, you know, try to withdraw that. You can't really because the website is down, but move it over to Patreon and we'll be golden. In that spirit, learn the information that you want and that you find useful and that you can slot into your own framework. And if that information is what the names of philosophers are that said which thing, then go ahead and learn that. I'm not your dad. And see you around, cunts.